Well, we're going to go out and look at some birds here, I suspect. It was pretty wet out there today. The water level is good, so that's good. And for those of you who've been going out there off and on, if you've been out there this fall, you realize that the area south of Colville Road looks very different this winter than it did last winter or the previous winters. And Graham Evans Peters is the manager of that refuge, as well as Finley. And he's going to tell us why it looks so different and what the hopes are with the restoration project going forward. Graham?
Thank you, Harry. And I manage Ankeny and Baskett. I'm sure some of my friends are watching on camera and they're like, he does not manage Finley. But I imagine December is a very hard month to fill, so I appreciate you digging underneath the couch cushions, Harry, and getting me here. Yeah, I have been with this service since 2013, and I've been Refuge Manager for about a decade. So everything we're going to talk about tonight, I am fully culpable for. I am very grateful and passionate about being the steward of these amazing lands. And I have had the privilege of working with Salem Audubon since day one on the job. We've done a lot of things together, like designing and building and operating the Ankeny Hill Nature Center. I'm sure many of you are a part of, as well as lots of restoration projects, presentations, and on and on. The mission of the Fish and Wildlife Service is rooted in partnerships. We work with you all, the American people, and so it makes me really happy to see so many people here tonight. That means that you obviously care about Baskett and you're interested in the place, as am I. My goal here tonight is to hopefully give you some context and reasoning for the recent changes that you see out at Baskett, the habitat changes. I'd like for this to be informative, but also cater to your interests. So when we get done, I hope you have lots of good questions for me. I'm aware there have been concerns about some of these habitat changes. Changes are hard sometimes. Wetlands have been drier, or there's been vegetation removed from the oaks, and we'll try to touch on a little bit of all of that. So this background should help explain where we are today and how we arrived there. The refuges were, when they were acquired in the mid-60s, they were already converted to cropland, and there'd been a lot of habitat alterations, a lot of wetland drainage, drain tillage, stuff like that. But they were selected because they were really core wintering sites for dusky Canada geese, and they had important wetlands, whether they existed or whether they were historically there. And for the first 20 to 30 years, not really a whole lot of active management went on the refuges. They were just goose sanctuaries. So over time, the refuge's goals and objectives have evolved and expanded. And we'll just walk through each one of these four things that have been a part of that evolution. The refuges support the biggest, core wintering distribution of duskies. There was a big wetland restoration effort that went on in the late 90s, and now we support a lot more wetland dependent wildlife, a lot more dabbling ducks than we ever did. And then native habitats. As you can imagine, the Willamette Valley has experienced a lot of habitat loss, and there's a lot of really imperiled native habitats. There's less than 1% of prairie and oak savanna, and so the refuges offer, a land base to restore habitat, to provide reference conditions, and obviously all of the associated wildlife benefits that comes with that is our mission. Um, a cool, quick story on the native habitats. Dave Marshall was a biologist for the service back in the 60s, and he was instrumental in selecting the sites, Ankeny, Baskett, and Finley. And when he proposed Baskett and Finley to the Migratory Bird Council, they were pretty critical of him and gave him grief about the amount of upland habitat on these goose sanctuaries. And sometimes you don't know what you have until you have it. And lo and behold, an OSU researcher, Paul Hammond, rediscovered the Fender's blue butterfly in 1989 in Benton County on the MacDunn Forest. And very shortly thereafter, we discovered one of the bigger populations in the valley at Baskett Slough. And so we know we have these really important remnant oak savanna, prairie habitats, and we've been doing a lot of work since kind of the 2010s, doing prairie restoration and work on our oak habitat. And then that segues into threatened and endangered species. We have 4 plants on Baskett: the butterfly and the threatened streaked horn lark. Like I said, a lot of work's been done in the last 15 years, and I think we're starting to realize some of those recovery benefits. The Nelson's checker mallow has been delisted along with golden paintbrush. And then in 2023, Fender's blue butterfly was downlisted from endangered to threatened. Still have a lot of work to go. And this is a effort by the Willamette Valley Conservation Community, by no means just the refuge, but we're starting to make big gains. And then public use. There's been a lot of changes with public use, namely the Nature Center coming online. But also there's been a new elk hunt at Finley in the last 8 years. There's a 2-day youth waterfowl hunt at Baskett now. And also we've really tried to reach a lot more diverse and broader audience at the refuge. We have a Latino engagement program that's thanks to Sam Bartling and our visitor services program. So now I'll walk you through a little bit of the history on habitat change through time. A lot of times our reference conditions for habitat is pre-Euro-American settlement. So think Oregon Trail and prior. The map on the left might be a little hard to see, but that's a rendering of what the habitat types looked at Baskett Slough in 1851, based on the General Land Office survey. And the dark green is wet prairie. Maybe to orient you to Baskett Slough, the kind of the headquarters is here. Coville Road would run along there. And so it was mostly prairie, both in the lowlands and the uplands. And then Baskett Slough was this really low gradient kind of stream wetland complex that flowed through there with a whole bunch of beavers, lots of beaver ponds, but mostly grasslands with a little band of forest. And then the tops of the butte were oak savanna. There really wasn't any oak woodland habitat at that time. And then this is the 1936 aerial photograph. And what you see after 80 to 100 years is some woody encroachment due to the absence of fire. And you can already see, a lot of farmland conversion and drainage. And recognize that, the primary processes that drove ecological function and process in the Willamette Valley was landscape level burning by the Kalapuya tribe. That was number one. And number two was these really highly dynamic floodplains that were a part of the undammed Willamette River and its major tributaries. We could probably not ever get that back, and that's not necessarily our goal, but we try to mimic those processes when we can, and use fire to manage these habitats. So these two images here are the exact same footprint. One is from 65 and one is from 2000. And what I want to show you here is this big restoration effort, this wetland restoration effort that I mentioned. We created, this was after the 96 floods, we created these 5 wetland impoundments that resulted in 600 acres of habitat on Baskett, of wetland habitat. At 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And the way they did that is they built these earthen berms perpendicular to Baskett Slough, and we just dammed the stream in 5 places. They drastically increased our carrying capacity for ducks, have enormous wildlife benefits, which many of you know and see when you come out there. They're not so great for fish and beavers and other aquatic organisms, frogs, salamanders. When a fish swims up Baskett Slough, prior to us doing any of this work right here, it gets underneath Highway 99, it's coming along, and then it bonks its nose when it gets to the Refuge Blue Goose sign on our eastern boundary because it can't get past. And that's what we're trying to rectify. So we've been doing a lot of work on stream and wetlands for some time now. That really started in 2018. Even though we were seeing these immediate wildlife benefits from the work in the late 90s, it didn't take very long, maybe 10 years after the fact, that biologists were starting to go, was damming that stream, really the right thing to do, and it's got some consequences because of it, some shortfalls. And so we started conceptual planning and running our ideas by some of our critical partners. ODFW has a fish passage authority in the state of Oregon, and the Oregon Water Resources Department manages or has authority over all the water rights. And so these were 2 folks that we work closely with, and there was a lot of ways that we could go about rectifying the situation. The simplest thing would be maybe to just put a fish ladder at each one of those 5 places. That'd certainly be cheaper, get the job done. But we also really wanted to take advantage of this opportunity and try to just mess with it one more time and not have to mess with it again. And so we really took the most holistic approach we could and said, can we get this thing to somewhat resemble historic conditions, giving all the infrastructure and things that are out there, like roads and things that we know we have to deal with. And yeah, I think that's good. And so the first project started in 2021 on the lowermost wetland in the system, the easternmost wetland. And that was about a 100-acre site. And I don't know how well you can all see this, but I'll just give you the real high points. First thing we did is we removed a big 3,000-foot long berm here. That was the barrier. We took that dirt and we built a new berm that separated the wetlands from the stream and the floodplain. We filled this big channelized straight ditch that was the old slough, and we remeandered a stream that looks like Baskett Slough when you get further downstream and it does become a naturalized stream. So we didn't just pull it out of a hat. We used some reference conditions downstream. And And then Harlan Slough is another smaller waterway that comes in here, and we have a big wet prairie over here. There's some nuances to it, but by and large, that's the gist of it. It's a lot of earth moving stuff, but it's really not that complicated. Couple action shots of the work being done. For me, one of the coolest and rewarding aspects of this work is we got to build this and using our own refuge equipment. We really, I think, took advantage of having a national wildlife refuge system. You know, the refuge system is 578 refuges across the country now, and it's growing. We really took advantage of having a vast network of places around the country and people around the country. And we pooled those resources in because people felt that this was a significant and meaningful project, and a lot of folks stepped up to help us. We had we saved a lot of money in the process too. You can see a construction of this magnitude, especially engineered plans and designs. And the engineer's estimate to do this project was $2 million, and we did it for less than $800,000. The picture of the excavator up there, that's the old channelized ditch, and they're scraping back the organic material so you can fill it in and pack it tight with fresh dirt. The bottom left picture, that's a self-propelled scraper in the background. They use those a lot for building subdivisions and building roads and stuff. In the wildlife world, we use those for building berms and moving big quantities of dirt. And then that road grader is actually putting like the final grade, the final touches on the restored stream channel. The project was accomplished with these, Fish and Wildlife Service equipment operators. We had 7 operators at a time, basically, because that's how much equipment we had. But we brought them in for 2-week details at a time. There were 17 of them that came from all over the country. And because this work was being done in a wetland, a really wet wetland, we had to get the work. We had a work window of August and September. You basically had to get it done in 8 weeks. And so these guys worked 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, and then they traveled back to their home state. They traveled on Sundays, so we were just going around the clock. Pretty neat too. In 2020 there was a bill passed called the Great American Outdoor Act. It set aside funding to address a bunch of the deferred maintenance, the backlog of infrastructure on the Park Service, the Fish and Wildlife Service. And this was the first Fish and Wildlife Service project that used the staff that were hired with that bill. So it was kind of neat. We had a bunch of new hires that didn't have a whole lot of experience, and they got trained up by our folks that have been around a long time. This guy right here, Robert Little, he worked at Baskett Slough in the 1990s, and he built a lot of those original wetlands. And his wife, he's retired now, but he worked at the Mid-Columbia Refuge, and his wife is a fish biologist. And he thought it would be the coolest thing to get to come back to his home refuge and kind of use, adaptive science and best management practices to rectify a situation. This guy, he was working at a fish hatchery in Idaho. He had a steep learning curve operating equipment, but we hired him 2 years later, and that's Aiden Fry, and he is our Great American Outdoor Act employee that's been at Baskett ever since. So we gotta test him out on this project. Pretty neat. Another cool thing about the way we're doing these new projects is we've really changed the way we put water control structures in, and we kind of move water around. The old way of water control structures, beavers would clog them all the time, and it would create a bunch of staff time, and you're always fighting them. And these things are now like in the middle of the berm. I don't bore you with construction details, but the beavers can't get at the flow attractant. And then you have these guards on the end of your culvert that goes through it. And so we tricked them. They can't clog our stuff anymore. So we're 4 years now after the fact on this, and we're really starting to see some signs of success. The 15,000 trees we planted, the ones that the beavers didn't immediately gnaw off, these things moved in. That was like 3 months after construction. But yes, they're now 6 feet tall and coming along great. ODFW has been sampling fish in our restored stream channel, and that's they caught juvenile coho in the stream in 2023. So 2 years after the fact. Pretty neat. Now, major success is going to take decades. I mean, we know that. Oftentimes we think on too short of time scales for this sort of stuff. But to see that in a couple of years is really encouraging. But it doesn't come without challenges as well. We planted 95% of those trees we planted were Oregon ash, and since then, now we know we have Oregon ash borer, and so we've had to change tree species composition quite significantly on anything we do moving forward. But again, learning and being adaptive is key to all this. This is a couple drone shots of the project area. This is in end of September, right after we were kind of done. There's actually a tractor out there making some dust right there, but we're close to being done. And then this was around Thanksgiving the same year, where the new wetland is filled with water, the stream channels meandering through here. Just gives you a little different view of it. And now jumping ahead to the stuff that Harry was talking about, our most recent phase 2. We just moved upstream one unit, and we took what we learned in 2021 and we doubled the size of it. We essentially implemented things the same way, but we had a larger crew, and we got some more help from conservation partners. Like I was telling you, the partnership thing is key. We got Ducks Unlimited involved, and they provided some of the engineering and the staking and things in the field that just allowed us to work a little faster. This is looking upstream. That's the old straight channel, and these flags are the alignment of the new channel. And we're 99 or 95% done, but we still have to install a bridge. We have to rip out this culvert in the berm and then put a 60-foot bridge there, which is a little different than the first project. The first project, we took the berm out completely, but that berm is a pretty significant arterial roadway for the refuge. I don't expect you to make any sense of this. Oh, if your eyes are really squinting, but this is a snippet out of the engineered plan set. I show this mainly to say that permitting is regulated on this stuff by the Army Corps and the Department of State Lands and DEQ and ODFW with fish passage. And so it requires a detailed engineered plan set. It requires some pretty specific considerations. And then we have to, when we take on the responsibility to build these things, we have to build it to specs. Your permit says you have to have a topographic survey when you're done, and you submit it to the Army Corps that shows that you built it how you said you were going to build it. So what we ended up with in Cackler is the stream kind of flows, bisects right through the middle of it. We have now a 120-acre wetland to the north of the stream. We have a 20-acre wetland down here to the south of the stream. And then we gave the stream about 60 acres in its floodplain to meander through that area, be able to break its banks in the wintertime, flood the whole area, and really do what streams should do. This is a picture of the restored stream channel, and what's kind of neat about it is it has this thing called a thalweg. Ray knows what I'm talking about, I think. But that's just basically a low flow channel that moves around as the stream meanders. And then it has variable side slopes on the side. This was jute matting that got put down for erosion control. We put in like some vertical snags for raptor perches, but more importantly, we put in like 400 logs, and those are put in like 8 to 12 log clusters. And what that's really intended to do is allow the stream to dissipate energy, to deflect energy, and really let it start creating its own pools and riffles. You know, we can go out there and muck around with equipment and think we know what we're doing with the stream, but it's really best to let the stream figure it out itself. So we just kind of put the tools in place to jumpstart it and let it find its own way. And really over time, I think we know that once the forest gets established and beavers are allowed to move in, they're going to dictate what the stream and wetlands do. And I can't, that's going to be a while, but that'll be incredible to see. And then the real star of the show, the work at Baskett, is this guy. This is Jeremy DePiro. If you're ever out there and you see another staffer, there's only Jeremy and I and Aiden. So it's very likely that it's him that you see. So I encourage you to say hi, introduce yourself, tell him good job. He runs he supervised that team day to day. He could jump in and run any piece of equipment. He really knows his stuff, and he's a local guy from Dallas. Been with the Refuge for 20 plus years. Now moving on, what we have to do to finish this thing. I kind of had this lofty goal, like if we could get this done in a decade, and we're coming fairly close to being on track. We've got 3 more barriers to deal with in these locations. And it's about 160 some acres between the 3 of them. One of the big big challenges is there's a culvert that runs underneath Colville Road at the Narrows, and that is on county property. And so Jeremy and I have met with the county. They actually know that culvert's rusting out and will fail sometime in the next decade. And so they're excited to work with us, and they like what we're doing. And so they will be responsible for putting a bridge in there. And then we'll do the rest of the work on the refuge upstream. We are also starting to do the design process for this last phase in 2026. And depending on how everything progresses along, hopefully finishing this off in 27, 28. Again, I think and sorry for the lack of bird pictures. I'm kind of a construction oriented here. And I'm not a wildlife photographer, so I try to give credit where credit's due. But again, what we're looking or what we're hoping to see is not going to happen on a year-to-year time scale, a 5-year time scale. Kind of have to think decades here. But that riparian forest is going to drive the beaver population. The beaver population is going to drive the ecological process and function. We're going to get dams. Water is going to move around where it wants to. All of those things will contribute to stream shading, water quality, organic inputs into from a deciduous forest really provides food for that aquatic insect web, which hopefully brings more fish to our stream in the wintertime, and on and on. And also, I think I think a while ago, there was kind of a paradigm where people thought, maybe you can't have your cake and eat it too. If we do this stream restoration, we're going to negatively impact waterfowl, or we're going to reduce the carrying capacity of waterfowl. And I think we've moved on from that. I would beg to differ that will be the case. I threw that picture of a western pond turtle in as well. Pond turtles got petitioned to be listed last year, and if we can restore 5 miles of a low gradient stream like this with all that wood in it, I have to think Baskett would be a great reintroduction site for turtles. So, the opportunities abound. This is a shot that John Schulte took with a drone up from Smithfield Road, and it does a great shot of capturing the 2024 work. Here you can see this is what we still have to get to. We've got a big, straight, channelized ditch. It crosses the road, and we still have a nice big wetland, but then we've got the meandering stream, the floodplain, and then that's the smaller wetland to the south. Okay, I'm done talking about construction and streams and wetlands. But I'll be very brief on this. I just wanted to touch on the oak and prairie stuff because it's really visible. Anybody that goes and walks Rich Guadagno Trail and comes out to Baskett can see some of our heavy-handed work in the last 10 years or so, and we'd like to explain ourselves. So if you can recall the historic conditions map that I had up in like the second slide, and I said it was almost all prairie and oak savanna, and it was maintained by fire. We're never going to burn down our oak woodlands by any means, but things have changed a lot. We've got conifers coming up through the oaks that will overtop the oaks. We've got woody encroachment in the oaks where they're both native and non-native species, but instead of having a grass understory where an acorn woodpecker could go and land on the forest floor and pick up an insect for its granary, now it's like solid brush, and they didn't even occupy Baskett up until 2018. And so we're doing a lot of this mechanical work where you come in with equipment and you clear the underbrush, which is a lot of serviceberry and hawthorn and cherry, and like I said, native and non-native, but we're trying to get back to a grass understory. We plant it with grass, and then the plan is that moving forward, we can maintain it with fire. We can burn our prairies and then back fire in underneath the forest. And so that's more typical of that sort of work. Then this is more of a conifer removal project where we had a lot of Doug fir overtopping these oaks, and they get really spindly and kind of weak. And we take the fir trees out. And cool thing is we work with many of our other conservation partners that do more stream work than we do. And a lot of times we put those fir logs in streams around the Willamette Basin. Don't know if the yellow shows up real well, but this is a map. It was intended to show you all these blocks of oak that we've worked in. So there's here, 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 basically the tops of the two buttes. We've gone through about 80% of them. The red is where we're actively working, and we've got one more block to go. Yeah, Stephanie asked about where the elk are found on Baskett, and most of them use the North Butte. So this private land property, we hold an easement on this now, but they like to be in here. But they also run a pretty big circuit up north of Smithfield, and I mean, I see elk tracks down in the wetlands at night. I mean, they really run pretty far and wide, but most people see them out here off of Smithfield. Last thing I'll touch on is the prairie restoration. Prairie restoration has also been pretty significant since about 2014. We've restored 290 acres of former agricultural fields. So we're taking fields that were in the cooperative farming program that were provided forage for wintering geese, but we're taking fields that had historically low goose use, and then also ones that were already around the butte that were adjacent to remnant prairie and occupied fenders habitat, and expanding that. So the stuff is really good for the threatened and endangered plants and the butterflies. It really contributes towards increasing native floristic diversity and improving habitat for pollinators and grassland birds. Like I said, I've been at this about 10 years. And when I first started doing prairie restoration, you could get like 15 to 18 species in a seed mix. And the whole restoration community in the Willamette Valley is working pretty hard on this stuff. And now we can easily get up to 40 plus species between seed and plugs and bulbs, and so that part is really cool. It's kind of similar to the oak map. These are the prairie restoration units, and like I said, they kind of wrap around the South Butte for the most part. There's a few disjunct ones, one over here, one up here, and a couple down south. And then we do have approval through, I won't get into this, but we do have a management plan that guides all of the stuff that we do on the refuge. It's called a CCP, and most every refuge has one. And ours is from 2011. It gets public involvement from all interested parties, so we're not just making these decisions in a vacuum. And so we still have a few units that the CCP allows us to restore from agriculture to prairie, and we're working on that. I threw a lot at you in a short amount of time. Thank you for bearing with me. Be remiss to say, I mean, we don't like the mission of the service. We work with others. We work in partnership. We can't do all of this stuff as a refuge alone. So these are some of our partners, but ODFW has been involved from the get-go on all this stream work. They actually contributed fairly substantially to our bridge that we're building this summer financially. Polk County will be a big player with their bridge. The Grand Ronde tribe has been involved and really supportive of this holistic style of ecosystem restoration from day one. They review our plans and provide input, and really the list goes on and on. The first phase, we partnered with a consultant, and they did great work for us. But when we move on to phase 2 and we get to work with a nonprofit like Ducks Unlimited, then they're actually contributing in kind, and providing their own match, because their constituents support this sort of work too. And so, yeah, it's really been a team effort. The Soil and Water Conservation District, they've been really key with helping us combat invasive species before we go out and start mucking around and moving dirt around, among many other things. Yeah, it's pretty neat to see what you can accomplish with a broad partnership. And I will stop there. Josie helped me with my last presentation, and I'm sure she's just being very critical over there, like fact checking me. Yeah. Yes, Stephanie.
Several years ago, I noticed population of milkweed along the highway, and I've looked for it since, and I haven't seen it. I think they mowed it. And I have a special interest in native plants, just generally. I'm wondering if you're planting milkweed on the refuge.
Yes, we are. And yes, there is a lot of milkweed on the side of Highway 22. But yeah, we milkweed is now actually a seed that's in the diversity mix. So that's big. Um, but we also know, that it takes a really long time to establish milkweed from seed. So yes, we still,
It's a weed.
it's a weed. Well, so yes, and we prefer to do things from seed because frankly, that's a lot faster and cheaper. We don't have the people power to go be planting plugs and bulbs all the time. But yeah, we've got quite a bit of milkweed.
Because it goes everywhere.
So you're not planting it in garbage cans like you did for us
I can't.
at the nature center?
I could do that.
That's pretty rapid establishment.
Any other questions?
Great question. Yeah, now that we know we have emerald ash borer that will eventually wipe out a lot of our ash, we are replacing it with native species, mainly 3 species of willow, white alder, black cottonwood, although cottonwood really can't handle the clay content of the soil down in our marshes. It's Bashaw soil. It's like some of the heaviest clay content in the valley. But yeah, cottonwood, a little bit of Oregon white oak. There's about 10, 12 species that we plant, ranging from, more shrubby stuff like red osier dogwood, Douglas spirea, all the way up to slow growing deciduous trees like Oregon white oak. But alder is probably the most compatible replacement in that soil type.
Hey, Graham, those you showed a coho there. Those coho spawned on the refuge or below the refuge? Do you really have any spawning habitat for anadromous fish?
We do not have any spawning habitat for anadromous fish, and that is because we are in the Rick Riel Basin, but Baskett Slough is a tributary to the Rick Riel, and the headwaters of Baskett Slough originate on the refuge. It's the reservoir pretty much is it, and there's no gravel substrate. There's not a rock to be found on the refuge. So it's an unconsolidated bottom stream. And that's when I say Baskett Slough historically was like a stream wetland complex. It probably just kind of diffusely spread all over the place, and beavers would really dictate where it pooled water or ponded water. So, but no, I'm not a fish biologist. I'll be quick to admit that. But my understanding is Baskett is like a juvenile nursery habitat for fish, and then also a place that those young fish would go to get out of really high flows in the winter and kind of seek refuge. Coho aren't even really, they weren't, I don't think, native and common to Baskett Slough, but they're there now.
Test.
This is when I don't like this to be recorded, because now I'm being asked a question by a true bona fide biologist who is going to just squash everything that I've said tonight.
I was just wondering why you're going with like forest habitat instead of wet prairie along the slough.
That's a great question. I didn't really get into that level of detail either, but we only planted trees 50 feet out on either side of the stream bank. So in that 60 acres that was a part of phase 2, I think trees are planted on something like 8 of those acres. The rest of it was heavily seeded to give bunch grasses. And then really when you have an existing emergent marsh, that seed bank is really strong and lasts for quite a while. So if you walk out there right now, you'll see, half native bunch grasses, half native emergent wetland plants. So it's not a wet prairie. It's wetter than it probably was historically, but there's, we kind of like found the compromise, I guess. I'd like to think that we could burn the floodplain every once in a while, but I don't, given how much prairie and oak savanna we have to burn on a regular basis now, I don't know really how likely that will be, but good question.
Thank you, Graham. You mentioned that you used some of the Baskett Slough run that was south of the refuge as a model to kind of base your designs. It makes me wonder, what is the condition of that area and how well is it protected?
Yeah, I wish I could get on Google Earth and show you around, but if you are, I think you are right that like immediately adjacent east of Baskett, it's a channelized ditch all the way to Highway 99. So another 2 miles probably, or a mile and a half. But when you cross 99, it gets onto like former Rick Real Dairies property, and then it goes a few miles out to Mud Slough and then Rick Real Creek. And once you get east of 99, it really does start meandering, and it's got an intact riparian forest that's it's got ash and oak, and so that's.
Oh, okay, thank you. And if no one else has a question, I have another question. I'm just wondering, you have a pretty well-developed seed mix that you're using now, and you'll be using fire where you can, but just in general, how well do you expect these newly seeded prairies to withstand incursions of non-native grasses, particularly?
I've been exposed. Non-native grasses are a real problem, especially annuals, and and we get more of them. I had a couple slides on invasive species control, and I took them out because I feel like I already had more information than was necessary. But if we didn't have to spend time dealing with invasives control, we'd have time on our hands. Yeah, anytime when we restore these prairies, it comes at a cost because a farmer farms the cooperative ag fields for us. We don't have to do a lot of work. So every time we take on a restoration unit, it's more work. And the whole complex, contributes to that. But we have to spot spray. We have to burn. We burn every 3 to 5 years. But any year that we don't burn, we still mow it in the fall. That's like our fire surrogate to keep woody encroachment at bay. So I didn't really touch on this either, but all of these prairie oak, these native habitats, their early succession, they're kind of conservation reliant on their own. They either require fire or a dynamic floodplain to maintain them. So it's really good for my job security. We always have something to do. But yeah, you can't really like walk. The only native habitat type you can kind of really walk away from or passively manage in the Willamette Valley is a mature riparian forest. And even those have non-native species.
Hang on a second.
Tim.
Is Morgan Lake the major source of water for Baskett Slough?
Yes. So Morgan Lake is what I consider our headwaters. And, one could argue, well, why are you doing all this work? And then there's a big reservoir up at the top of the system. And that's just where we made a decision to stop our efforts. We're keeping Morgan Reservoir because, one, it provides a water delivery source for the wetlands. We feel that's important. One, in the face of climate change, it provides a little bit of resiliency. I know we're getting soaked with rain right now, but we were pretty dang dry up until December 8th. And now we're getting 5 inches at once. But that reservoir, ensures that we have some water coming down in the early fall, provides stable, early migrating habitat for migratory birds. Yeah, that's.
My husband has property to the north of Baskett Slough, and where Etna Cemetery is, if you know where that is, historic anyway.
Yeah.
There was a bunch of removal of cherry, and there was a project at the top of that butte, I think, where they took out a lot of cherry and other
On private
stuff.
property.
Yeah,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of the oaks were so spindly that they just fell down because they didn't have the support and the protection in the winds. And I don't know if that's something you're planning on or working around.
Yeah, that can certainly happen. And I didn't get into this either, but we do have a private lands program that does work with voluntary landowners around. And so, I don't know, we could have been involved in that work as well. But yeah, it's kind of one of those risks that you're willing to accept for the ecological restoration at times. Those oak trees, when you do thinning or you do take out non-oak species, they're vulnerable for a while, but they do, regrow a crown. A lot of times they start to get, kind of their open growth form. Because if you look, you look at an oak tree that grows out in the wide open sun, it's a big umbrella shaped thing and its branches almost touch the ground. And then in a woodland, not so much. And so some of them recover, but some of them definitely fall down from wind or root rot and a number of things. And I think that you just kind of let the cards fall where they may, so to speak. A lot of times we don't even come close to thinning our oak woodlands enough, but you do it slowly and incrementally so you don't lose a whole bunch at once. Who knows? I mean, a refuge manager 2 generations down the line from me, maybe going into our oak woodlands and doing a second thinning. Certainly possible.
Anybody else? Thank you very much, Graham.
Thank you.